So as to keep this video structured and organized, like my individual controller reviews, it is going to be broken into separate categories for parts or components of the controller, such as Dpad, triggers, then things like warranty and software programs. But when it comes to each of those categories, instead of one gamepad getting my primary focus, you're going to get the bronze, silver, and gold medalist in that order, and I'm going to explain exactly why they got that grading. And then at the end of the video, I will rank all three of these controllers value, bang for buck, price to performance. However, there are two that I do strongly recommend for two different demographics of gamers, as they are two very solid gamepads. And interestingly enough, the controller in dead last actually wins a few categories, more than a couple. I guess you're gonna have to watch the video to find out why it's not a recommend period for me. If it's winning categories, what the hell's wrong with that thing? You know? In full gamer heaven fashion, I want you to get comfortable, maybe kick up your feet, crack a brew. You don't drink, that's fine, grab a Fresca.
This is your controller captain. We've reached 6,900 feet. Go ahead and start flicking the sticks and mollywopping the back paddles.
You don't like back paddles? How about those rear buttons? We've tested almost 100 custom and premium controllers, and we're only at the beginning. You need a thumbstick guide or a tutorial on how to overclock your controller? Check out the controller playlist.
Bing bong.
Controller captain out.
As for packaging and included accessories, taking up last place is going to be the Wolverine Pro. It does come with a physical instruction manual, which is good because the BFG does not. But the biggest problem and why it takes last place, it doesn't have an included carrying case, and it's the most expensive controller in this comparison by $50. I do genuinely believe that any Pro controller that has loose accessories such as swappable thumbstick caps or even a USB-C cable, which they should all ship with, there should be some kind of an included carrying case, or if not a carrying case that fits the controller, at least a little pouch or baggie to hold the accessories all in one location. I'm very good about not losing accessories, but I know from reading my comment section that individual parts do get lost. Second place is going to be the BFG. PDP's packaging wasn't as nice as Razer as far as just plastic in the box, not foam, and there is no included instruction manual, just a QR code, which actually doesn't take you to an instruction manual, just the landing page for the product. You need to navigate to the instruction manual and download that PDF. I dislike the included thumbstick caps on the Wolverine and the BFG, however, I dislike the ones on the BFG more, but the fact that it has an included carrying case and that fight pad, which I think is phenomenal if you're into fighting games, beat 'em ups if you will, and the BFG having that unique modular design, being able to go symmetrical PlayStation sticks or offset Xbox sticks, that's kind of an included accessory because it's the module that does that. Second place. First place obviously being the Edge, as it has a hard carrying case, which I rarely see with premium controllers. They usually have a soft cloth case, which you can do things like this. The presentation of the carrying case with the Edge is awesome. You have a QR code which takes you to the instruction manual, and you can actually run a USB-C cord through the back port of the carrying case and make it a little charger dock like the Elite Series 2's case. Although that case is better in that aspect. You just drop the controller in there and it has little contact pads and pogo pins that make contact with it, so you just drop it in like a dock, as where this, you still need to like plug it in, so it's not as dockish. First place for packaging and included accessories. Feels incredibly premium. Feels first party. Feels Sony, you know? In that aspect, the controller is completely designed to match up cosmetically with the PlayStation 5 and all of its accessories, such as the Pulse 3D headset, charging dock for the controllers, even the media remote. It's all coordinated with that white and black reverse Oreo design. I don't know why my voice got so deep there, put a little bass in it.
As for cosmetics or appearance, bringing up the ass end is going to be the Victrix BFG, which is quite unfortunate because this had potential to be a badass motherfucker. I think that's exactly how I worded it during the review. It has a relatively menacing front faceplate, and the only color pop is going to be this plum purple around the thumbstick bases. However, pictures and videos just don't do it justice, or maybe justice is the wrong wording here, but when you see this controller in person and get hands-on time with it, not only build quality wise, but also cosmetics leave you slightly flaccid, as all the plastics are mixed and matched. There's a different rubber pattern and material on the front that there is on the back. This looks like it would be rubberized, but really it's just some cheap ass plastic, and everything just looks like cheap porous plastic that was thrown together. In second place in the cosmetics department, I didn't dim the lights to set the mood for us, although these controllers are looking pretty sweet. I wanted to give you a little taste of these RGB strips. Chroma lighting, as Razer likes to call their RGB. Looks pretty good and can be dimmed or disabled via the software, which we'll talk about later. Unfortunately, it's a cell phone app, but unfortunately, you can't see much of that RGB when you grab the controller and hold it normally. Most of the time, I just disable it to save battery life because, like I said, you can't see much of it anyway. First place is going to be the Dualsense Edge, which I think looks absolutely fantastic, and you might be wondering why I have this little piece off. As I mentioned during the review, you might have thought I was kidding, but absolutely not. I definitely think this gives it more of a stripped down steampunk rat rod vibe with exposed mechanical pieces, and I don't think you're at any risk of any damage happening whatsoever, considering you have to purposely flick these aluminum switches to get the thumbstick modules to slide off their tracks. You are at no risk whatsoever of hitting these in gameplay, but this piano black gloss trim piece will collect fingerprints and micro scratches like nobody's business, not to mention gloss black looks pretty damn cheap in my opinion. What really does it for me in the cosmetics department is going to be the little PlayStation face buttons on the touchpad. Very nice. Function buttons, I think, add a unique little flair that you don't see on every DualSense controller. I actually do like the gloss black D-pad and face buttons with gray lettering. And then bringing things together on the top, you have more face buttons on the triggers, a little bit of stippling or texturing to provide grip. Then in the back, I absolutely hate this gloss archway and this cheap plastic, but the metal half domes are nice. These white rubberized grips are fantastic. And guess what? If you get up nice, close, and personal, just like a stock DualSense controller, those are little tiny PlayStation face buttons, but instead of plastic stippling, it's actually rubberized grip. And the fact they actually etch that pattern into the rubber is just wild. Little Easter eggs like that. I love it.
As for the weight and measurements of these controllers, the dimensions if you shall, and how hefty they are, this is not a graded section, but I'm just going to grab the excerpt from each one of those reviews.
Manufacturer's weight and dimensions of the Pro BFG are popping up on screen. That's awesome if you like reading numbers. Manufacturer's weight and dimensions popping up on screen somewhere around here. Manufacturer being Sony in this case, since it is first party. Now, as far as manufacturer weight and dimensions, that's going to be popping up on screen somewhere in this general vicinity, far enough away from my face for general safety.
Maybe a different segue for that section from now on.
Now, ergonomic or real-world comfort-wise, the Razer Wolverine V2 Pro is going to be in last place, as it does have the most uncomfortable shell design with these large palm haunches, well, no spot for your middle finger to really hike up because of the large battery on board, and their hyper-speed wireless module, which I'm sure is a pretty big chipset, or something is pretty large inside this controller. And because the internals or guts need some space to breathe inside there, that cuts into the shell design, which cuts into the ergonomics or comfort, then you get into the issue when you actually want to use your rear buttons. And while I will say this rear button design looks completely wonky the first time you see it, but in practice you can get a solid gaming session of about 2 to 3 hours out of it. That's about it. You're going to start feeling a lot of knuckle fatigue, primarily in the top button. So if you're just going to use your middle fingers to use the bottom buttons, that's a decent solution. I have heard a lot of Razer controller owners slide their fingers up to these top 2 buttons, but if you're trying to cover all 4 of them simultaneously, not really comfortable for these middle fingers up here, at least not after a couple hours. Also, the rubber or silicone compound they went with these hand grips just doesn't vibe well with me. Not a great surface material making contact with your palms. Let's get it out of here. Now, second place is going to be the Victrix BFG, and this was a close one. This controller almost took first place for a couple of reasons. You have the ergonomic shell design of an Xbox One or Series controller, which are virtually identical. The Series shaved a few millimeters on the bumpers, but other than that, same shape and shell. This takes an Xbox shape, but you can go either symmetrical or side-by-side thumbsticks if you're a PlayStation fan, or offset thumbsticks if you're an Xbox fan. However, I will say having symmetrical or side-by-side sticks on the Victrix Gambit isn't quite as comfortable as a stock Sony controller, which I actually find very comfortable. And that is because you can see if I line up thumbstick to thumbstick, niblet to giblet, when you do take this thumbstick layout with the sticks side by side or symmetrical, they're actually closer together by about a ½ inch in compared to a standard Sony controller. But that alone wouldn't have been enough to knock it out of first place. PDP decided to go with 2 different types of rubber making contact with your hand, this little patch in the front and this little doodad in the back. Pretty much everything that your hand is making contact with, whether that's rubber, plastic, or well, I guess that's the only 2 materials here, not the best. So that leaves for me in first place the DualSense Edge, even though it is not as comfortable, the shell design, as a stock DualSense controller, and that is because of the swappable thumbstick modules. There isn't as much of a place for your middle finger to hike up and get a good grip on these palm grips, an issue that could have been remedied by going with magnetic Hall effect sensors in the thumbsticks versus swappable potentiometer modules. The included thumbstick caps add to comfort tremendously, as this is some of the softest and most supple, yet grippy silicone or rubber compound I've ever felt. Now, the 2 metal paddles, the lever back, aren't the most comfortable things in the world, and I barely ever use them because they're pretty light. You can accidentally actuate them, an issue that I found more and more occurrent after my initial review, which I'm sure you saw. However, these half domes are fantastic and I have been using them frequently. They are metal, feel very good on the fingertips, and even though this looks like the Razer Wolverine where you have to cock your fingers out, these are lower, unlike the Razer Wolverine which are higher, and also because these are half domes and not buttons, it gives you a place for your finger to rest on there to where there's zero fatigue. They just basically sit on those half domes until you're ready to squeeze them, in which case you need to apply a fair amount of pressure. Yeah, comfort for sure. Now, as for build quality, in the lowest potential last place is going to be the Victrix BFG. I'm just going to play a little excerpt from the dedicated review. Just like the Victrix Gambit, the $100 wired Xbox controller, which I have reviewed on the channel, the materials that PDP went with this Pro BFG are anything but professional or pro. Build quality is simply something that is going to be lost through picture or even this video review, but it just feels like this controller could absolutely snap in my hands at any time. You want to hear a nice satisfying sound? I'm going to apply a little pressure to the chassis to test that structural rigidity, if you will. Thank you, Kevin. That pretty much summarizes build quality. Now, the Razer Wolverine is quite a bit better. However, I did mention during the review, and I'll mention it now, that all the surface materials, the plastics, the rubberized grips, everything just feels relatively cheap, except for the mecha tactile face buttons and D-pad. But other than those two components, build quality definitely doesn't fall in line with a $250 controller, let alone if they were asking $180 for this controller, which is more comparable with the BFG, which feels like a toy. In first place for build quality is going to be the Dualsense Edge, as all the plastics, rubber, and metal that Sony decided to go with feels fantastic. Also, the swappable modules you'd think might cut into structural rigidity or integrity of the controller. It might be loose and wobbly because it has these modules that are meant to replace if you get stick drift. That simply isn't the case. They have them on a track system with an aluminum lever that feels fantastic to engage. Build quality is just simply there. As for warranty, bringing up last place is going to be Razer, sporting a 1-year warranty on the Wolverine, as well as pretty much all their PC peripherals. I did share a table or chart with all of their different products, and it's pretty underwhelming for all of their gear. Sony's offering 1 year of limited coverage on the Edge. However, you do have that contingency plan in place of being able to buy $20 thumbstick modules if you do develop stick drift over time. BFG is still going to take first place, as it does offer double the coverage, 2-year warranty. And down the road, there's a good chance PDP is going to offer swappable replacement modules. At least they would be silly to not. As for the D-pad or direction buttons, in last place is going to be the Dualsense Edge. Not that there's anything wrong with this controller in the D-pad department. However, Sony had a great opportunity here with their first ever first-party controller to come out of the gate swinging and slugging. Black with gray lettering, face buttons, and D-pad, but it is still a membrane switch, so it's just a rubber plunger mechanism. Nothing to write home about, and they are going to bring up last place. Now with the Victrix Victrix BFG, I should say, inside the included carrying case, you are going to have 3 options for D-pad. One is going to be pre-installed, and it is going to be this, what I referred to as Victrix Dish, and it is my favorite option. That's why I have it installed on the controller currently. It does feel pretty good. This is still a membrane pad under here, so it's a little bit mushy and squishy. All the inputs kind of bleed together, but it will get the job done. It is serviceable, and I do like the fact that you have swappable shapes. So if you don't like this dish and you want to go with a typical 4-point D-pad that you're used to, you can do that. Or if you want something raised out of the front shell a little bit further, maybe something easier for you to hit because you use the D-pad frequently, you have this hybrid wheel, which kind of gives you a 4-point as well as a wheel. This one is virtually unusable just because the plastics they went with are so damn slippery and slick. Just go ahead and get it out of here. Victrix Dish for me, second place. And you can't put these in the wrong way. They have to be lined up and push them until they click. Razer's 8-way micro switch D-pad is an absolute joy in my opinion. I'll give you a quick auditory sample of that bad boy. It is 8 mechanical switches. They don't have a tap life cycle rating like 3 million clicks for the face buttons on this controller, but it'd be fair to assume that they're going to last longer than a membrane switch, and they sure as hell feel better. It's going to be first place in the D-pad department, at least for me. Get ready for the next segment. You just didn't want to get on your jack stand, did you little biscuit? As for the face or action buttons, in last place is going to be the old PDP over here. In fact, I'm going to take a little excerpt from the comprehensive review because I really like the way I worded why I don't like the face buttons. Now, unlike the Fight Pad, which has very large, flat, mechanical buttons, big fan of these. These action buttons or face buttons are serviceable. They'll get you through gameplay. Granted, you're probably not going to be using them as much as you used to on that standard controller because you can rebond them to these rear buttons, baby, but they're really nothing to write home about. Not a huge fan of how small and closely spaced out they are. 3 out of 5. I'm not going to smack them around or anything, but I'm not going to take them out to dinner. 3 out of 5. In second place is going to be the Dualsense Edge over here because it just has those typical membrane switches. They don't look cosmetically offensive, but you're spending $200 on a controller. You don't just want to be like, yeah, well, they get the job done. I mean, the face buttons feel like your $60 Dualsense, Joe. I mean, go pick up your stock controller at home, Dan, and give it a click, and that's what my controller feels like, my Pro controller. You would like a little bit of separation between the entry or standard controllers and then the premium or Pro controllers that you're spending double, triple, quadruple on, God knows. Some of these bad boys get up there if they have a builder and whatnot, and you get carried away with the cosmetics. The face or action buttons on the Wolverine Pro are fantastic. They are mecha tactile buttons. That's Razer's marketing gimmick name, but at the end of the day, they are mechanical switches rated for a tap life cycle of 3 million clicks. And I have always lauded Razer controllers, the Ryju for PS4, as well as the Razer Wolverine Tournament and Ultimate for Xbox, and this controller for having those fantastic mecha tactile buttons that are light, tactile, crisp, perfect rebound, bounce back to their neutral position, and just feel so satisfying to click without being astronomically loud either. First place. Now as for the accessory buttons, so the touchpad, pause and share button, the tournament lock button on this controller. In last place is going to be PDP's offerings. These look like they're going to be rubber, but they are the cheapest plastic I've ever seen. The touchpad is notably smaller than both offerings, so less surface area for you to use this thing, and they just feel like ass. Get them out of here. Second place is going to be the Dualsense Edge. I cosmetically love the face buttons on the touchpad, as I mentioned during the cosmetics section. The share and pause button do feel a little bit more secure, snug, with less side-to-side wiggle than a stock DualSense, and everything just works as it should. First place is going to be Razer's offering, as they went with large or oversized buttons. They are raised far enough from the front shell to make them easy to hit. You don't need to get a fingernail in there like some other controllers. Large PlayStation button top dead center, a little LED light bar right here for status, and Razer went with the mechanical switch for the touchpad as well. Nice. So first place for the accessory button suite on board the Razer Wolverine Pro. Now as for thumbsticks, joysticks, or as they're referred to on PlayStation, analog sticks, last place is going to be the BFG, or by fucking golly, these things are pretty whack because they don't do the best of either aspect or thing you want your thumbstick caps to do. That would be to either have long-term reliability or durability, where they're just going to last a very, very long time, or provide tremendous grip for you while they do last. So maybe they'll break down, maybe start falling apart. And what do I mean by falling apart? Well, pictures on screen here of what thumbsticks from Scuff used to do until they got acquired from Corsair and started using a different silicone or rubber compound in the thumbsticks and hand grips. But prior to that, they used a rubber compound that was grippier than their current offering, but it broke down and had zero long-term durability. After sometimes months of moderate use, they would just start disintegrating basically. The two concaved options as well as the domed options feel exactly like that, where they feel soft and squishy like they're gonna disintegrate basically, but they don't really provide a dickload of grip either. So what are they doing here? Who knows? And then your tall option, the sniper stick, as they like to brand it as, provides virtually zero grip as it is almost flat. It's not really domed or concaved. It is just the smallest little dip in, and this rib texture on the outside doesn't provide any grip. Also, it's a little bit too narrow for my liking, which the Elite Series 2 is as well, but I've actually gotten used to those sticks. And then you've got these large bumpers around the outside of the thumbstick gates, which almost looks and somewhat feels like it's cutting into your maximum range of motion, cutting into your travel. So yeah, just fuck. In second place is going to be Razer's offering. I wish I could just tie third place with the PDP and the Razer and then give first place to the Edge over here, but that's not how it works. There needs to be a third, second, and first. There's no ties in this comparison whatsoever, but there is going to be more than one victor at the end. I guess you're going to have to watch the end of the video to make that whole sentence make sense. I have my two preferred thumbstick caps installed on the Wolverine over here, and these are the same exact options that have been shipping on Razer Wolverines for years. Now, these have larger anti-friction rings on the thumbstick gates than a standard DualSense controller, which I mentioned during my review. Looks and feels like, again, like I said with the PDP, like it would cut into travel or maximum range of motion. That feeling is doubled by the fact that the stems or shafts of your thumbsticks are about double, 2.5 times wider than a standard stick. So wow, that really makes you feel like you can't move these sticks very much. And while I don't really hate the rubber or silicone compound they use, I don't like the shape of the right. I do like how wide it is. That's actually quite beneficial for accuracy in my opinion, but it's pretty damn flat. I wish they decided to go with a little bit more of a dip in if they're gonna take the concaved route. One thing I will say for the thumbsticks, I do like how secure it does feel swapping the caps, as they are magnetized and you can only get them in one way. They kind of have to line up with little divots or tracks in there. That's about all I got to say about them. They perform decently in Gamepad Tester, but they're gonna, yeah, they're not great. First place in the thumbsticks department, and as I get a little bit closer to you because I think it's time we get a little bit more intimate with one another, is going to be the DualSense Edge. These are absolutely phenomenal. Now, I personally prefer dome sticks as long as the silicone or rubber compound is grippy enough. If not, then dome sticks are just out the window. They have to be concave because your finger needs a little place to rest in. But they are grippy. You can go with the dome shape, which I prefer. I have all the way back to the PS2. Sony continued to use it on the 3. And then with the PS4 and 5, Sony went with the hybrid thumbstick caps that we saw on the DualShock 4 and the DualSense. These dome thumbstick caps feel absolutely phenomenal. Also, swapping them feels pretty confidence-inducing, even though they're just held on with friction, not magnetized like the Microsoft Elite and Razer Wolverine line. These are just held on with friction. But as you can see, they have a much more secure mechanism, and you get a nice tactile click when you do pop it into place. I like that. I really genuinely do wish that Sony included 2 more thumbstick cap options, and definitely a higher right option. As I mentioned during my review, it is not a high-rise stick whatsoever. It's more of a mid-rise. I don't have the exact millimeters on hand, but if you're into playing dedicated first-person shooters or even third-person action adventures, you're going to want a higher right stick than that. But these are so grippy, feel so soft and supple. And this is the only controller here that is somewhat stick drift proof, because even though the PDP does have modules, there is currently not replacement parts, which I find absolutely baffling that this can replace this whole right section with a fight pad for fighting games, and this whole left section you can rotate if you want symmetrical or offset thumbsticks, but there is no replacement parts sold from the manufacturer on PDP's website or from Amazon, meaning that if you get stick drift, you're still buying a $180 replacement controller, as opposed to why the hell is PDP not just selling $30 replacement modules like Sony sells their $20 modules from PlayStation Direct? Now, the ideal play absolutely would have been for all three of these manufacturers to take the magnetic Hall effect route with their thumbstick modules as opposed to potentiometer sensor thumbstick modules, which not only aren't the most accurate thing in the world, but the biggest problem here is going to be they inevitably will develop stick drift, whether it's 4 months or 4 years down the road. Now, me personally, I have a fantastic record with stick drift. You can dig around in some of my previous videos. It's very, very light. Now, if you do develop stick drift on a Nintendo, PlayStation, or Xbox controller, I do have a guide linked in the description below where I walk you through a couple of methods on the computer using software programs to tweak your dead zones in an effort to stop stick drift. As for the bumpers, it's the Dualsense Edge bringing up the rear in third place, as Sony didn't go with the same stippling or texturing on the triggers, and these bumpers are identical to a stock Dualsense controller. Second place is going to be the Victrix BFG. Even though these bumpers and triggers provide virtually no grip, you would think that this would be some kind of stippling or texture to provide some grip. Not whatsoever. Very slick, very slippery. However, the bumpers are in a good ergonomic position where you want to naturally rest your hand. You can actuate these with both the tips of your fingers as well as the meat of your index fingers. They're also very comfortable to wrap your fingers around and sound like a nice mechanical switch. They're a little bit loud, but not obnoxious. First place is going to be the Razer Wolverine V2 Pro, as this does have an additional set of bumpers, so 6 additional inputs. You have the 4 rear buttons, then you have 2 additional bumpers, which are in a great position right between your regular bumpers and your triggers. Plus the bumpers, extra bumpers, and triggers are all mechanical switches. Bumpers is going to Razer all day. Bumpers or shoulder buttons, whatever you prefer to call them. These bad boys above the triggers. And as for the triggers, the Wolverine is going to be in last place. All 3 of these controllers do something very unique in the trigger department with some kind of a trigger lock or stop system in place. And the Wolverine system isn't bad, however, it's just the worst of the 3 systems available. You can turn them off and have a nice linear squeeze, modulate the throttle and brake inside of a racing game, or just any game that requires full control of the trigger. Then you start playing a first-person shooter, maybe a third-person action adventure, you snap these on, and now you have an instantaneous mouse-like switch. That is the entirety of the trigger pull. Now, that is a bit of a squeeze that looks about 2 millimeters. This is going to be third place for me. The BFG is using the clutch system, which is a 5-way trigger lock system, which you can quickly engage and disengage on the fly. So you have your full pull of the trigger, turn on the clutch button, you heard that little tactile click, and now that's the entirety of your trigger pull. A little bit shorter than the Razer Wolverine. However, these do have a terribly hollow or tinny sound. Good to see Toys R Us is back in business. But I really do like the control, the customization of having 5-way trigger stops. You can really fine tune these. Like I said, they're quick to engage and disengage, so you can turn these on and off while you're in gameplay. Pretty sweet. In first place is going to be the Dualsense Edge. This does have 3-way trigger stops, which in my opinion, the middle stop is virtually nothing. It cuts out about 20% of the pull, so I can't really find a use case scenario or a specific genre or niche of game where that's going to be useful. You either want full travel for something like racing games, or you want something that feels incredibly responsive for shooting games. So usually that is a very light tactile mechanical switch. Now, even in their third mode, these still have quite a bit of travel, but what makes these fantastic and why they get a first place position for me, or a gold if you shall, is the fact that you still have the adaptive triggers. So if you're playing first party Sony Interactive Entertainment titles, you're still going to have that functionality of the adaptive triggers, yet if you can turn on these trigger stops, just skip over the middle level for God's sake. A lot of extra play before you actuate the switch on that third setting, but I really do like that stippling. It provides a good amount of grip, looks cool, and having 3-way trigger stops and full functionality of the adaptive triggers, that's sick. Now, as for rear buttons or back paddles, which in my opinion is the most important feature of a pro or premium controller, because it allows you to keep your fingers on the thumbsticks constantly moving and aiming rather than diverting them to the D-pad or face buttons. But if you have back buttons, rear paddles, or a rear input system that isn't comfortable to use, you're simply not going to want to use it, and you're going to revert right back to using the face buttons. Now, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone that the Razer Wolverine V2 Pro is going to be bringing up the rear, as this is not a very ergonomic or comfortable rear button design in my opinion. It is much more functional or usable than it appears to be, because this looks absolutely ridiculous, but it definitely is usable. However, the plastics they use feel incredibly cheap and chintzy, flimsy if you will. A lot of side-to-side wiggler play, not very confidence-inducing, not too loud. I do like that, give them a little praise, but after testing dozens of premium and pro controllers with various paddle or rear button designs, this simply isn't it, and currently this holds the title for worst rear button design, and the PowerA Fusion Pro holds the title as the undefeated king of worst rear paddles. I'd rather just use a standard controller, to be honest. And this is the same rear button system on the Razer Wolverine, which can be had for around $80 on Amazon. $100 is the MSRP, but it's always on sale because it's been out for years. And it's just quite baffling that with a $150 upcharge to their next model or trim level of the Razer Wolverine series, that the rear button design is still this ergonomically disastrous. They have to be doing some R&D or research and development to figure out that gamers don't like this. I know they've got a little notepad around the round table that they're jotting this shit down, yet this is still what we're dealing with. And a $250 $250 Pro controller. Golly jeepers. In second place, grabbing that silver medallion is going to be the BFG, or bro, freaking goodness, this is a pretty good rear button system. I'm sure I just lost a couple of subscribers. They're running for the hills right now because they're scratching their head and their tuchus wondering, AK40 Kevin's about to give first place to a 2 rear button system? There's no fucking way. A 4 rear button system, a good 4 rear button system, by the way, this is a really good system, is getting trumped, defeated, or slain, if you will, however you want to word that, by a gosh darn 2 rear input system. There's no way. I didn't know what to think of them. Now I think I like them. However, there's only 2 of them. I think I'd like it more if there were 2 more rear inputs back here. No, I personally greatly prefer having 4 rear buttons or paddles vice 2 because it comes down to simple mathematics. There is 4 face buttons and 4 reasons that I should not need to remove my thumbs from strafing and aiming down sights. Plus you got those rear buttons. Go ahead and spam some crouches in there. Maybe throw a little hop in there. A little slide cancel into a hop. You know, nurse, I think I rolled my ankle. I'm as surprised as you are, to be honest. Now, unlike the Victrix Gambit for Xbox, which uses a swappable system where you have a 2 rear button and 4 rear button option, this uses 4 permanently affixed rear buttons that are damn near flush with the rear shell in a very good ergonomic position where you want to naturally rest your hands. The bottom 2 buttons are covered by your ring fingers and the top 2 buttons are covered by the meat or ball right here of your middle fingers. These do require enough resistance you're not going to accidentally actuate them. I actually got 0 false actuations, so that's good. Just out of being over caffeinated and getting too wily with the action on screen, sometimes I tense up and squeeze the rear buttons, even 4 years after using Pro controllers like this. Didn't find that happening with the BFG. I do like that the pattern on the rear buttons matches the triggers and bumpers. Granted, they provide absolutely 0 grip. They do look quite nice. And I lauded this controller for having the best, absolutely quickest method of remapping all the buttons on the fly. It takes about 2 seconds per button. Maybe a tad quicker if you know a local Heisenberg that can hook you up with little uppers, downers, and all-arounders, if you will. And these buttons are good all-arounders. They're incredibly versatile, and if this is your first time picking up a Pro controller, I think you're going to be very satisfied with these. Like I said, 4.5 years experience using controllers like these, this is one of the best systems I've tested. So why the hell is it taking second place then? Now with the Dualsense Edge, you do have 2 rear button options available in that very nice hard carrying case. You do have the lever backs, which are traditional metal paddles, very similar to what's on the Microsoft Elite Series 2. There are markings LB and RB on the back of the controller, which will coordinate with markings etched on the back of the paddles. Now these are okay. I mentioned during the review I actually liked them quite a darn bit, and I do stand by that sentiment, but upon further use, they are actually very easy to actuate, and I wish they required about double the resistance or force to hit these buttons because I find myself accidentally hitting these lever backs all the time, just when I'm trying to naturally grip or hold my controller normally. But Sony did put these paddles very close to the rear shell, which makes ergonomics or comfort very good. I just wish they required a lot more force to actuate them. A lot of false actuations here. Get them out of there. Now installing the metal half domes, which I have been spending a freakish amount of time with. These are not labeled LB and RB because they are identical, so you can use either side on either slot. And you cannot install these the wrong way as they do have to slot or socket in one way. The Edge also has you extending your middle fingers. They don't have to be your middle fingers. You can actually hit these buttons with your index fingers, middle fingers, or ring fingers. However, the most comfortable, natural that I think 90% of gamers picking up this controller are going to do is just use the tips of their middle fingers to actuate these half domes, which are metal, require enough resistance or strength to where you're not going to accidentally actuate them. Plus, unlike the lever back paddles, which are down here where you want to grip the controller, you have to make a conscious effort to reach out and press these. Now, when I'm playing with the Dualsense Edge, generally I have my fingers out like this, covering the half domes like the entire play session, depending on what game I'm playing. And these are just such a joy that I haven't really minded having to reach over and manually press to it. Well, I guess it's all manual. You're the one hitting the controller, but to reach over and press some of the face buttons on the front of the controller. And what I found myself doing is what I've been recommending or preaching to button users for the longest time. What controller action in game is constantly requiring you to take your fingers off the thumbsticks and press a D-pad or face button? That's what you should rebind to these rear buttons. So for example, in Hogwarts Legacy, I've had my shield spell bound to this half dome and my dodge roll to the other half dome. So basically both of my defensive options, block or dodge. Now you cannot rebind these inputs on the fly, which is kind of a pain in the ass. However, the software is very good because it is integrated directly with the PlayStation 5 software, just like Microsoft does on the Xbox with the Elite Series controllers. During gameplay at any time, hold down either one of these function buttons and you will have control of your headphone jack as well as be able to rebind the 2 rear inputs, which I'm wild about. Now, I'm still a tried and true 4 rear button guy. It's in my blood, it runs deep, if you will. But I will say the simplicity and convenience of only having 2 rear inputs, it's a lot less to think about, well, exactly half less to think about which button you're hitting on the back, not to mention, these are so goddamn comfortable. The combination of them being metal and also the shape, I guess, that half dome shape. If I'm sweating profusely, it's very hot in this room, and I cannot turn on a ceiling fan because it will degrade the audio quality. Take pride in my work, I'm not gonna have that happen. Enjoy the audio quality, asshole. You're not an a-hole, I guarantee you're a quality individual, just like these half domes are quality as fuck. Feels plasticky and cheap.
As for the application or program, the software that's backing up the hardware, the honors of last place is going to go to the Wolverine. It's well deserved. You've earned it. It is a phone application, which is definitely not my preferred method of delivery. The app itself had 2 out of 5 stars for a reason. It is incredibly glitchy, wonky, and you need it to bind the rear buttons of the controller as they are null and void, dead on arrival, or not bound to anything. So you need this application to bind anything to the rear buttons. Half the time it doesn't even connect. And it's pretty frustrating that Razer couldn't use the Chroma application, which controls other PC peripherals such as keyboards, mice, headsets, etc., or integrate an application in the PlayStation Store on the App Store, which we've seen with plenty of other third-party controllers in the past. But the application's just a huge crap wagon. As for the BFG, it is going to be using Victrix Control Hub, which is the identical application that the Victrix Gambit for Xbox uses. Now, that application is able to be installed on Xbox One and Series consoles, which is how I showcased it in the review of that controller. And you can also install it on Windows 10 or 11 PCs. I do believe it has Mac support as well. I could check on that, but I'm probably not going to because I'm recording a video right now. I've got other shit to do. And most people that run these controllers probably aren't gaming on Mac anyway. Who's gaming on a Mac anyway? You know? But I said it is going to be the Victrix Control Hub. Currently, there is not support for that. There is one comment down there floating in the comment section of the review. A reviewer claimed that you need to reach out to PDP and they send you some drivers. That sounds incredibly sketchy. That should never be the case, where you need to reach out to a manufacturer and say, hey, I purchased your controller. Can you send me a private packet that I'm going to download to my computer of drivers, and then I'll be able to do the update and use the software program? It should go without saying that that should not be how that works when you purchase a consumer electronic item. The software program should be up and running, or if it's not, a day 1 patch or update to get it up and running would be the next play there. But it is taking second place, as I do believe PDP is going to be proactive with getting that application up and running. And when it is up and running, it was actually a decent software suite on the Victrix Gambit, with a lot of control over things like trigger dead zones and thumbstick response curves. And the clear as day winner, you ain't got a Windex off your glasses to see that it's going to be the Dualsense Edge, because it's integrated directly with the PS5's operating system. You can be in-game, hold down one of those function buttons, a little pop-up window or overlay will pop up over your game, letting you know that you can press one of the face buttons and it will change the profile for you. It is also a pretty in-depth software suite, and it does have dead zone adjustments, so if you start developing stick drift, you can counteract it there. And when stick drift does start really bending you over and having its way with you, you can fight back a little bit by swapping those $20 thumbstick modules. Dualsense Edge, #1 for software suite. As for battery life, the Edge is bringing up the rear, as that is definitely the weakness or Achilles heel with this controller. I do have an entire video explaining why battery life is so astronomically shitty on this controller, substantially worse than a stock Dualsense controller, and also some steps you can take to increase the battery life, although you're going to be giving up some features. But in my testing, having completely depleted the Edge several times, battery life is going to fluctuate between 4 and 8 hours. And as with a standard Dualsense, although this is using a different battery, there is no fast charging support, although you're not going to be sitting there for too damn long. Generally 30 minutes to an hour will get you indicating 3 bars of battery life on the PlayStation 5, although God knows if that's actually 100%. But the amber or yellow lights will stop flashing on the controller after about an hour and a half of being plugged into the charger from completely drained. Again, video linked in the description below going much more in depth with the battery life on the Dualsense Edge, because it's a fucking problem. And it's really frustrating because otherwise it's such a damn good controller, but the battery life is very bad. I don't like how I said bad. It had a little Dahmer twang to it, you know? I had that meat that went bad. The BFG is sporting a 2000 milliamp hour battery, which in my opinion should be getting it more than the estimated 20 hours, not estimated, the advertised 20 hours from the manufacturer. Now, the community of people that own this controller and have been sharing their experiences online, as well as my experience, do all correlate, and you'll get about 18 to 20 hours of battery life with this controller, with about 2.5 hours of charge time getting you back up to 100%, or at least where the lights stop flashing. 20 hours of battery life is pretty damn good on a PlayStation 5. Granted, you are missing out on 4 features that do come with a stock factory Sony controller, that being the adaptive triggers, haptic feedback vibration motors, a built-in speaker, and an onboard microphone. The gold medallion of honor is going to go to the Wolverine, which will get around 10 hours of battery life with the RGB on. However, I definitely recommend turning it off because only a very small small amount of it is actually seen when you're holding the controller. And with it turned off, you're getting 28 hours of battery life. So that is such a huge difference. 10 hours with the lights on, 28 with the lights off. If you can sacrifice that dank RGB glow, which I know will tank your FPS and max out your ping, but if you can muster up the gusto to turn off the RGB, 28 hours of battery life is pretty damn good. First place. As for stock input lag or delay, if you're playing wired on the PC, the third place is going to go to the BFG, which does support 8 milliseconds of input lag or delay wired, as well as with that 2.4 gigahertz dongle. So there's literally no speed benefit when playing on the PC going wired versus the 2.4 gigahertz dongle, but you will have the benefit of not having to worry about battery life. Second place is going to go to the Dualsense Edge. I was actually unable to test the stock input lag or delay and then do my usual overclocking process and then remeasure the overclock performance in my initial review due to the tools that I generally use, that being Rewaz, DS4 Windows, X Input Test, and Gamepad Tester. All were having some very sporadic wonky communication issues since the Dualsense Edge does use a different board, a different PCB than a stock controller. But luckily the gamer heaven community, or at least the scumbums and scallywags down there in the comments section of that review, brought to my attention a lovely little program called DSX, which is a $5 buy over there on Steam. A separate video tutorial is coming in the near future because I have gotten a lot of time with that program since that was brought to my attention, and it brings some pretty unique functionality of the Dualsense controller to PC. But with that program running in the background, I was able to spoof my PC into thinking the Dualsense controller was actually an Xbox 360 controller. Then I was able to measure the polling rate, which looked to be about 8 milliseconds, but upon further analysis of the numbers, it has actually 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay, because what was throwing off the average was just the first input, just that one outlier being one very large number throwing off my averages. But if you scroll manually through the numbers, you can see clear as day a bunch of 3.8s, 4.0s, etc. So it is definitely a 4 millisecond input lag or delay on the stock clock, which I'm assuming is a 250 hertz. And my results when measuring Bluetooth were completely sporadic, so I'm going to give them a non-applicable rating because they were not consistent enough for me to deem them reliable. In first place is going to be the Razer Wolverine, which has 1.9 milliseconds of input lag or delay if you're going tethered or wired to the PC, and 3.8 milliseconds when you are rocking that dongle. So you're taking a slight speed hit, but the convenience of being wireless versus tethered to the PC is nice. Most gamers won't even notice the difference between 1.9 and 3.8 milliseconds. As for overclocked performance, in last place is going to be the BFG. She is polling rate locked, so you're going to have the same performance, 8 milliseconds wired, and with the 2.4 gigahertz dongle, which I did attempt to overclock in the review. In second place is going to be the Wolverine, which is also polling rate locked, but that is going to get you 1.9 milliseconds wired and 3.8 milliseconds with the dongle. First place is going to be the Dualsense Edge, is when I did have DSX running via Steam. Well, you launch it through Steam, then it just runs in the background of your PC. It is doing the same job as DS4 Windows and Rewaz, neither of which had compatibility with the Dualsense Edge, which you probably noticed during my initial review, but DSX does the job, and I was able to overclock, which showed me an average of 0.9 milliseconds. Again, I had to manually scrub through the results because it was showing around 6 milliseconds, which I knew simply was incorrect. So I scrubbed through the numbers manually and saw that one very large number, the first input, so that one large outlier is going to throw off my average. But by some simple analysis, just scrubbing through the numbers, you can see that there's a lot of 0.8, 0.9, pretty much everything under 1 millisecond. So there you go, under 1 millisecond of input lag or delay when wired on the PC. Following the typical overclocking method in my guide, probably specify what I'm pointing to when I do this, the description of the video. I'm not like, how bad you want to learn how to overclock? Why don't you get up under this desk or anything? It's not a, quid pro quo situation. I'm just going to give you the overclocking guide. Now, as for the overall value, price to performance or bang for buck, bringing up the rear, surprised to no one at the highest price point of $250 is going to be the Razer Wolverine Pro. As just like the Victrix BFG, you are removing 4 features that come with a standard Dualsense controller, that being the haptic feedback, adaptive triggers, onboard speaker, and built-in microphone. In addition to this, the Razer also comes with no carrying case, cheap packaging, only a 1-year warranty, a shitty software program that you need to bind the rear buttons, and I simply honestly cannot advise anyone to purchase this controller, which is unfortunate because a lot of you watching this video might already own this controller. If you're enjoying it, that's all that counts, but if you're not enjoying it, hopefully you bought it from a vendor like Amazon or Walmart that has a no questions asked or minimal questions asked return policy. Yes, I did mention Walmart and Amazon as they both are authorized vendors of Razer. It's actually pretty weird. One of my local Walmarts has a Razer aisle or section with keyboards you can try out and stuff. Crazy. I guess they have like a contract with each other or something. The reason this isn't a good value, this controller retails for $250 in both the black and white variant. That is confirmed over here on Amazon, and we can come over here to this model, the V2 Chroma, which I have reviewed on the channel. Guess what? It's in my hand over here, and if I flip her around the backside, that has the identical rear button system. That also has the Mecha Tactile face buttons. The extra extra bumper inputs, the micro switch D-pad, the RGB light strips. Are you getting the trim that shares about 95% of the features or functionality with this controller? The separation there being this can be used on PS5, can go wireless versus always being tethered, and has these upgraded micro switch triggers that are a mechanical switch versus the more traditional trigger stops in the V2 Chroma. Now, this is currently $130, but I have seen it go on sale as low as $100. I do have an entire video about why the original OG Wolverine is actually a better controller than the V2 Chroma that replaces it, its successor, if you will. So how it breaks down for me at the end of the day is that you're paying an extra $130 to jump from a wired PC and Xbox platform to a wireless PS5 platform. However, you're losing out on 4 of the core features that make the PlayStation 5 an immersive controller system, the Dualsense. I don't know why I said system. The Dualsense controllers. It's early, I haven't had my coffee yet. 16 cups it takes to get the body going. And if you're absolutely in love with this rear button system or something, again, all the features of this controller, all the key features are shared with the substantially cheaper variants of the Wolverine family. And beyond all of that, I could maybe even swallow all of these issues if this was just a comfortable controller to hold. The palm grips are not comfortable for me in comparison to an Xbox or Dualsense controller, or a lot of other third-party controllers I've tried recently. This is just the least comfortable shell design. Second place is going to be the BFG. If and when you can buy it, is going to be $180. And the real kick in the sack is going to be that there is no swappable modules, even though this is a modular controller, but it's really just to customize your experience. It's not to replace the broken parts as of now. I'm hoping to the controller gods that PDP jumps on board with selling $20 or $30 modules. These are going to develop stick drift. These are potentiometer thumbstick modules. I know they know that, but you might be wondering, Kevin, this is $180. Why is it in second place and the Edge at $200 is in first place? Well, that comes down to that atrocious build quality. This feels like a toy, meaning that this does feel like they sourced a $50 controller overseas very cheaply, rebranded it as a pro controller, sold it, sold it to you. They ain't really selling them. They're locked and jammed, but eventually once they start trickling out supply. But the combination of that cheap ass build quality and the fact that they don't have any replacement parts as of now, and I can't guarantee that they're ever going to, silver medallion and get the fuck off the podium, please. Step aside for the winner, which is the Dualsense Edge, trademarked, which retails for $200 out the door with tax and shipping. You're probably going to spend about $210, but it does have a very premium unboxing experience. The included accessories kick ass. You got a hard plastic carrying case, 2 rear inputs, and the included thumbstick options. They're kind of my favorite thing right now, thumbstick wise. And then this is what I like to see. If I click on this little linkaroo, $20. And also that's actually very reasonable. Sony could have made these $40, just really bent us over because they want to monetize us on the back end. You spent $200 on a pro controller, sweet. Welcome to the pro controller world. Here's some swappable modules for you. But no, this is a very respectable offering. This is a very reasonable. I think what really just kind of staggered me there is that Sony has pulled a lot of anti-consumer plays in the past under the reign of Jim Ryan. Not that I have anything particularly against the man. He's got good fashion sense. I'll give him that. He's a snappy dresser. But since none of these controller companies are ready to make the jump to magnetic Hall effect sensor thumbstick modules because it's going to cut into their profitability, this is the next best thing. And the fact that Sony had it ready at launch, these modules are ready to be purchased. I am looking forward to those modules becoming available on Amazon and other third-party vendors, other places than directly from PlayStation. Not that there's anything wrong with PlayStation Direct. I bought a lot of shit from them recently. The Dualsense Edge, PSVR 2, maybe the Ragnarok Dualsense. That's a lie. I didn't buy that controller. It does look cool though. The controller in dead last that provides no value and I just simply can't recommend that any gamers purchase is of course going to be the Razer Wolverine V2 Pro. However, the decision between a Victrix BFG and a Sony Dualsense Edge is not a cut and dry decision, and quite honestly, if you have the means financially and also I guess you just morally can swallow having 2 pro controllers or whatever. I don't know what the barrier to entry is for you, but if you can have both of them, give me a second. I want them both in hand because I'm talking about them, I'm getting emotional, I'm getting passionate, and I want to explain why they're both such bangers. What group or demographic of gamers I recommend each controller to and why. You gotta have 4 buttons or paddles because it makes mathematic sense to rebind all the face or action buttons to the thumbsticks, and that does absolutely make sense, and I stand by that sentiment. I've said it dozens of times, and it makes total sense. I'm gonna contradict that later when I talk about the Edge a little bit. Organized chaos here at Gamer Heaven. It all makes sense in the end. If you're picking up a controller to play primarily on PC or to play PS4 games on your PS5, so you're not going to be utilizing the adaptive triggers and haptic feedback, then this is a fantastic buy for you, as it does have one of the best 4 rear button systems for PS5 currently. There is a lot of really good ones on the market. Battle Beaver, amazing. Hyper, solid. Aim V3, yes. Scuff Reflex, decent. Evil, yes. There's others that I'm forgetting, but this stands shoulder shoulder to shoulder with all of those titans. Also, the trigger stops being the clutch system, fantastic. If you have a headset on, you can't hear that rattly tinny noise. I like everything about this controller except the build quality, the fact you can't buy swappable modules, and the fact it's removing the PlayStation fanfare features from the DualSense controller that make PS5 games so addictive and immersive. It's the gimmicky features that come together to be like, whoa, holy shit, I felt like I was there. I never really get that experience playing on my Xbox, but I do get the value of Game Pass. That's fucking sick. And I also think $180 is a very fair asking price, even though I guarantee you they spent substantially less during the manufacturing process over there at the old PDP factory. Well, they didn't build it there at PDP. That's where they stamped the Victrix logo on it and then sent it out to you in the purple box. This is a good controller. It is. You're bad. But this is a better controller. It's weird. I have to put down a 4 button and pick up a 2 button over here, and I'm like, oh, you're the one I want to lay with tonight, and pretty much every concurrent night from now on. I'll lay with her occasionally when I'm feeling a little bit frisky and I want to get fucking buck wild on the PC and just slap some people around in a COD lobby. But, and by the way, I have been getting better, more proficient in the first-person shooters. I did mention in a video about a year and a half ago that I wanted to get like really good at shooters. I'm getting better. I am. Not saying I'm good or anything, but getting better. The DualSense Edge is the controller that is going to end up in the hands of more gamers, and that is because it is a first-party controller from Sony. It holds that Sony branding, just like Microsoft, with their first-party Xbox Series line, which started in 2015 with the Elite Series 1. Well, it wasn't called the Series 1, just the Elite. You're getting sidetracked again.
Can't maneuver.
Stay on target.
We're too close.
Stay on target.
But it's fantastic Sony is finally offering a premium or pro controller for me in this channel, because it's going to get a whole lot of eyeballs on that wall back there. In all seriousness, since I've got my DualSense Edge and did the initial review, the only times I put it down to grab another controller has been to test other controllers for reviews and comparisons, and most notably when the battery dies after about 4 hours. Sucks ass. The simplicity and comfort of those metal half domes is phenomenal. The trigger stop system, I wish it was shorter, but the fact you still have the adaptive triggers is great. There is a new Pro controller for PS5. It's not currently on the market, but it will be available for public purchase soon. I actually have one in my possession. I've been testing it and using it for about a week now. Basically makes this trigger lock system and all other PS5 trigger stop systems null and void, or just not just stupid. Not reviewing that controller just yet. But the overall experience when you get a DualSense Edge is exactly what it should be with a premium or pro controller. You have a nice hard carrying case and good included accessories, 2 different options for rear inputs, and some of the best thumbstick cap options I've seen in a long while. At the end of the day, when I'm playing a game, I want to be fully immersed, and all those gimmicky features that PlayStation controllers came with, flashing red and blue and cops are behind you in Grand Theft Auto, cop CB radio chatter coming out of the speaker in your controller, that was kind of cool. But then with the DualSense, you have adaptive triggers, they get stiffer, lighter depending on what's going on screen, and the haptic feedback motors that are a huge step up in immersion from the sloppy rumble force motors that we had, well, still have on the Xbox controllers and had on the PS4 controller. Basically everything except the licensed DualSense platform. I say platform because all of those custom controller companies such as Scuf, AIM, Battle Beaver, Hex, Megamods, Cinch, Hyper, just to name a skosh, a handful I've reviewed, those all start with a stock factory DualSense controller. I got one right here for you, and you can also customize these yourself. There's a company called Extreme Rate that sells parts or kits on Amazon, video coming in the near future, where you're still going to have the haptics, the adaptive triggers, the speakers, the onboard microphone, but you can add things like rear buttons, trigger stops, swappable thumbstick modules. The DualSense Edge feels like a much more premium and complete package in my opinion, and that's good because I think a lot more gamers are leaning towards this controller, unless you're trying to click on faces wired on the PC, in which case you're probably looking at the Victrix Gambit. These controllers here are a yin to the yang, are a light to the darkness, and I'm so glad to ride that thin line between the both of them. I'm glad I own both the controllers because I use them both. However, I use this controller for substantially more because I do the majority of my gaming on PS5 as of recent. I do all my video editing and work on this beastly PC over here. I game on it sometimes. I mean, the goddamn thing's got a 3090 Ti in her, for fuck's sake. But out of all my consoles, Xbox Series S and X, PS5, Steam Deck, Nintendo Switch, PC. I don't know why I said that so dreary. Like, it's depressing to have all those platforms. PS5, Xbox, Switch. The PS5 has been getting the most use by a fair margin, but it goes in cycles. It's cyclical because I'll play the hell out of my Steam Deck for like a couple weeks, and then I'll be on Xbox for a while because like a good title just came on Game Pass. But it's been a solid couple months of just me slathering the PS5, and the DualSense Edge has been in my hand consistently since I got it. But if and when I do play on PC, this bad boy has the dongle plugged into the front of my PC suckhole because this is also a killer gamepad. Just don't drop it, it might crack on you. And the Wolverine, I'm glad that I was able to purchase it and review it, and hopefully a lot of you saw the review before before pulling the trigger on purchasing that controller. Maybe we'll do a teardown and customization of the Wolverine or something. That's a good idea. She ain't going just, you know, e-waste. We waste no part of the animals in this tribe. We use the hooves, we use the blubber, we use the snout, we use the claws, the talons. We're gonna make your innards your outards. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach in a system as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at Gamer Heaven. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. To get in touch with myself and the stallions and stallionettes of Gamer Heaven, join the community Discord and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding. Starting June, I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting Gamer Heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily. All the time. 60% of the time. Sometimes. Most of the time. Peace.